Hello. Happy Wednesday. How's it going? Oh. Happy Wednesday to you, puppy. Happy Wednesday to you, too. You want a snack? I need to refresh my browser. Here we go. Farmhouse says, happy puppy. Yes. Happy puppy to you. Happy puppy to you too, Farmhouse. Not many people in the chat at the moment. Ah, hello, Sharkies. How are you on this fine Wednesday? Have you seen Puppy? Look at how cute and palm-sized he is. Oh, there we go. A pet. Oh, there we go. Pretty extremely average. Why is my oh, I updated my software and it reset my font size. Oh, that's too big. Yeah, that's alright. Pretty extremely average, eh? Oh, I got out of focus. I don't think you're average. I think you're phenomenal. So, deal with that. Farmhouse warned me that it was like, well, half an hour. Farmhouse warned me that it was 6:30, which I was unaware of because it's still quite light outside. Look at right there. Look at that. That's a window. Look at how bright that window is. There's no electric lights out there. That's just daylight. It's 7 o'clock. Jeez. So I was kind of like, oh, I gotta go get ready. Caught me by surprise. Still playing Mini Cake. Welcome back. How you doing, Mini Cake? What's new? Haven't seen you for a week or two. Something like that, right? I'm gonna guess that I haven't seen you since March 2nd. You just missed a puppy appearance, says Farmhouse. Well, he's summonable. I'm doing quite well. Incoming. I've been playing lots of Elden Ring. Just kind of taking over most of my spare time. This car's making noise outside. I'm level 66 or so in Elden Ring right now. I found a nice place to grind up some levels, so I spent some time there. You can hear them? Yeah. Yeah, this place isn't always the quietest. This puppy's name is Binabik. Yeah, you're Binabik, which is sort of for short. His name's actually Binbinikegabinik, and he is a very good puppy. Sometimes he hangs out in here while I read. Yeah, Binbinikegabinik, or Binabik, or Bin, or Binbinikegabinik Theodore Good Puppy, if you want the full name. Right? Yeah, he doesn't know why I'm just saying his name all over and over. Or Fluffy Muffu. Elden Ring has been very interesting. How old is he? He's over 5. He's adopted, so I don't know exactly how old he is. He came all the way from Korea. Picked him up at the airport when he got off the plane. Yeah, he's not getting any bigger. That's full grown. A lot of people seem to expect that, oh, he's still growing. No, that's it. Full-size pup. Yeah. So, we're over halfway through Queen of Sorcery, which has been interesting. We just got through a whole chapter of Wallace Shawn, Emperor Ranbaroon, the, 7th? No, 20, it was like 23rd, wasn't it? It was actually Ranbaroon the 23rd or something. We got brought into the palace to meet the Emperor by the Cherik ambassador, whose beard had been cut off by a Nadrak woman, the wife of the Nadrak ambassador, who keeps his beard in a little gold box and shows it to all her friends. Yes, Ranbaroon the 23rd. Marmo says, the inconceivable Emperor. Yeah. So there was a lot of back and forth between the Emperor and Mr. Wolf and Aunt Pole. Some attempts to prove that they are who they say they are. Yeah, a keepsake. And then Asherak, the Murgo, showed up, or the Grolem, who is apparently, I think, the Murgo ambassador. Was it Murgo, or he may not have even... No, I don't think he's even an ambassador. He's just the gentleman from Tholmergos. The contingent from Rakgoska. Which makes a little more sense. It's a little less weird that he's not... It's a little less weird that he's not the ambassador, because otherwise he would just be doing everything. So he and Mr. Wolf had some verbal sparring. Oh, my throat's a little scratchy today. I don't think I'm sick or anything, but it's just... just got a scratch in the back there. Hopefully that won't be a problem. Anyways, yeah, so they threatened each other back and forth for a bit, and that's where the chapter ended. Oh, we also met the Emperor's daughter, Tolnedra, who was quite upset that she wasn't allowed to go to the market by herself right now, or even with guards, I think. She wasn't allowed to leave the palace because of all the political turmoil and the fact that she might get taken hostage or murdered or something, but she didn't seem to care about that. She just wanted to go to Toshi Station to pick up some power converters. Yeah. I think that's all the significant events that took place there. So, we're on page 187 in my copy out of 322. Well over half now. Why don't I get into it? It's 10 after 7. Let's go. Chapter 17. It was mid-afternoon when they emerged from the palace gate. The broad lawns were green in the warm spring sunlight, and the cypress trees stirred in a faint breeze. "I don't think we want to stay in Tolnedra too much longer," Wolf said. "Do we leave now, then?" Mandaralin asked. "There's something I have to do first," Wolf replied, squinting into the sunlight. "Barak and his cousin will come along with me. The rest of you, go on back to Grineg's house and wait there." "We'll stop by the central market on our way," Aunt Pole told him. There are a few things I need." "This isn't a shopping expedition, Pole." "The Grolims already know we're here, Father," she said. "So there's no point in creeping about like sneak thieves, is there?" He sighed. "All right, Pole." "I knew you'd see it my way," she said. She wins almost every one of their little bouts, their little arguments, doesn't she? Sharky say, "Were we told what time of year it was when they first left Faldor's farm?" And Farmouse thinks it was getting into winter but still fall. Yeah, that sounds right, because it was raining a lot on the roads. And then eventually I think that started to turn into slushy snow. I don't remember them saying specifically, but I remember the descriptions of the weather. Sharky say, whenever that kind of temporal clue is given, they usually have a point. They were in a lot of wintry areas. Yes, but it was rainy and then starting to snow in Sendaria before they left for Cherek. Yeah, it was harder to tell. It was definitely harder to tell when they were in Cherek, because who knows, it could be snowy there all the time. But I think they were in Cherek during the winter. But now I just read that it's spring. Ah, yes. Yeah, I think we've been through a few seasons of this year. Mr. Wolf shook his head helplessly and rode off with Barak and Grineg. The rest of them rode down the hill from the palace toward the gleaming city below. The streets at the foot of the hill were broad and lined on either side by magnificent houses, each almost a palace in itself. "The rich and the noble," Silk said. "In Tol Honeth, the closer you live to the palace, the more important you are." "'Tis oft times thus, Prince Keldar," Mandaralin observed. "Wealth and position sometimes need the reassurance of proximity to the seat of power. By ostentation and propinquity to the throne. Propinquity. I don't know if I've seen that word outside of this particular instance. Propinquity. Ostentation, sure, everybody knows ostentatiousness. But propinquity? Interesting word, says Minicake, yeah. I guess it means it must be similar to proximity. I wonder what the difference is between proximity and propinquity. Sharky say the wealthy ego is fragile. "By ostentation and propinquity to the throne, Small men are able to avoid facing their own inadequacy. Ouch. I couldn't have said it better myself, Silk said. Sometimes Mandaralin does have a certain way with words. The central marketplace of Tolnedra was a vast square filled with bright-colored booths and stalls where a significant portion of the goods of the world were on display. Aunt Pole dismounted, left her horse with one of the Cherek guards, and moved busily from booth to booth, buying, it appeared, almost everything in sight. Silk's face blanched often at her purchases, since he was paying for them. "Can't you talk to her?" the small man pleaded with Garion. "She's destroying me." "What makes you think she'd listen to me?" Garion asked. "You could at least try," Silk said desperately. See, Silk's ego is getting larger and larger here. Or wait, smaller and smaller? The ego is in relation to the size of the purse. The larger purse equals larger ego, but more fragile. So Silk's ego is getting stronger because his wealth is going away. Varmos, coming to the rescue with the word definition, apparently propinquity denotes an even closer closeness than proximity. Like close proximity, I see. So proximity just means your distance from something, but propinquity means how close to something you are. Because you could be, like, proximity is just, like, I'm not sure how to say what I'm trying to say. That you are close. But proximity doesn't necessarily mean you are close to something. Proximity is near, propinquity is close. Okay, all right. Well, I've learned something. I feel like I've learned something. Sharky say proximity is nearby, propinquity is right with. All right. Ahem. 3 richly mantled men stood near the center of the market, arguing heatedly. Minicake says, learn something new every day. Today I learned what propinquity means. Probably didn't learn how to pronounce it, though. Yet. 3 richly mantled men stood near the center of the market, arguing heatedly. "You're mad, Haldor!" Haldor. One of them, a thin man with a snub nose, said agitatedly, "The Honeths would strip the Empire for their own profit." His face was flushed, and his eyes bulged dangerously. "Would Cador of the Vorduvians be any better?" the stout man named Haldor demanded. "You're the one who's mad, Randon. If we put Cador on the throne, he'll grind us all underfoot. There's such a thing as being too imperial." "How dare you!" Radan almost screamed, his perspiring face growing darker. "Grand Duke Cador is the only possible choice. I'd vote for him even if he hadn't paid me." He flung his arms about wildly as he talked, and his tongue seemed to stumble over his words. I know how that feels. Cador's a pig," Haldor said flatly, carefully watching Radan as if gauging the impact of his words. "An arrogant, brutal pig with no more right to the throne than a mongrel dog. His great-grandfather bought his way into the House of Vordu, and I'd sooner open a vein than bow to the offspring of a sneak thief from the docks of Tolnedra. Radan's eyes almost started from his head at Haldor's calculated insults. He opened his mouth several times as if trying to speak, but his tongue seemed frozen with fury. His face turned purple, and he clawed at the air in front of him. Then his body stiffened and began to arch backward. That doesn't sound good. Yes, it is 7 p.m. here. I'm in the region of Vancouver, Canada, British Columbia. Are you wondering, based on the light over here, it's starting to get a little brighter now that it's evening. It looks brighter on camera than it does in real life right now, though. Oh, you're a newfie. It's nearly midnight. Oh, geez. All right, well, how are things on the other side of the continent? I've never been that, well, I was going to say I've never been that far. I've never been that far east in Canada. I've been further east or west, depending on how you want to look at it, in the world, but I haven't been over to that coast. It's dark. Yeah. Yeah, I guess it would be slightly darker at midnight than, Haldor watched him with an almost clinical detachment. With a strangled cry, Radan toppled back onto the cobblestones, his arms and legs thrashing violently. His eyes rolled back in his head, and he began to foam at the mouth as his convulsions became more violent. He began to bang his head on the stones, and his twitching fingers clutched at his throat. Radan's having a bad time. Farmos is wondering if he got insulted to death. Let's find out. Amazing potency, the third mantled man said to Haldor. Where did you find it? A friend of mine recently made a voyage to Tor, Haldor said, watching Radan's convulsions with interest. The beautiful part of it is that it's completely harmless, unless one gets excited. Radan wouldn't drink the wine until I tasted it first, to prove that it was safe. You've got the same poison in your own stomach? The other man asked with astonishment. I'm quite safe, Haldor said. My emotions never get the best of me. Radan's convulsions had grown weaker. His heels beat at the stones with a rapid, pattering sound. Then he stiffened, gave a long, gurgling sigh, and died. Sharky say, iocane powder. I don't suppose you've got any of the drug left, do you? Haldor's friend asked thoughtfully. I'd be willing to pay quite a bit for something like that. Haldor laughed. Why don't we go to my house, and we'll talk about it? Over a cup of wine, perhaps? The other man threw him a startled glance. Then he laughed too, although a bit nervously. The two of them turned and walked away, leaving the dead man sprawled on the stones. Sharky's saying Tolnedra is really just proving itself to be the Princess Bride. Garion stared in horror at them. He was just watching this whole thing take place. Garion stared in horror at them, and then at the black-faced corpse, lying so grotesquely twisted in the center of the marketplace. The Tolnedrans near the body seemed to ignore its existence. Why doesn't somebody do something? He demanded. They're afraid, Silk said. If they show any concern, they might be mistaken for partisans. Politics here in Tolhoneth are taken very seriously. Shouldn't someone notify the authorities? Dernick suggested, his fail pace and his fail pace, I said that. His face pale and his voice shaking. His fail pace. That was a fail on my part. Oh, puppy is fully snoozing over here. Look at this guy. Got his back to me. Little dark spots for ears. I'm sure it's already been taken care of, Silk said. Let's not stand around staring. I don't think we want to get involved in this sort of thing. Sharky say that's what I have when I run. A fail pace. Nice. Aunt Pole came back to where they were standing. The two Cherrick warriors from Grineg's house, who had been accompanying her, were loaded down with bundles, and both of them looked a little sheepish about it. What are you doing? She asked Silk. We were just watching a bit of Tolnedran politics in action, Silk said, pointing at the dead man in the center of the square. Poison? She asked, noting Radan's contorted limbs. Silk nodded. A strange one. It doesn't seem to work unless the victim gets excited. Athsat, she said with a grim nod. You've heard of it before? Silk seemed surprised. She nodded. It's quite rare, and very expensive. I didn't think the Nysans would be willing to sell any of it. I think we should move away from here, Hatar suggested. There's a squad of legionnaires coming, and they might want to question any witnesses. Good idea, Silk said, and led them toward the far side of the marketplace. Near the row of houses that marked the edge of the square, 8 burly men carried a heavily veiled litter. As the litter approached, a slender, jeweled hand reached languidly out from behind the veil and touched one of the porters on the shoulder. The 8 men stopped immediately and set the litter down. Silk, a woman's voice called from within the litter. What are you doing back in Tolhoneth? Bethra, Silk said. Is that you? This is one of the few people that has referred to Silk as Silk outside of the group, the traveling group. Most people either call him Prince Keldar or one of his disguise names, like his merchant disguise names. The veil was drawn back, revealing a lushly endowed woman lounging on crimson satin cushions inside the litter. Her dark hair was elaborately curled with strings of pearls woven into her tresses. Her pink silken gown clung to her body, and golden rings and bracelets clasped her arms and fingers. Her face was breathtakingly beautiful, and her long-lashed eyes were wicked. There was about her a kind of over-ripeness and an almost overpowering sense of self-indulgent corruption. Oh boy. For some reason, Garion felt himself blushing furiously. I thought you'd still be running, she said archly to Silk. The men I sent after you were very professional. Silk bowed with an ironic little flourish. They were quite good, Bethra, he agreed with a wry grin. Not quite good enough, but very good, actually. I hope you didn't need them any more. I always wondered why they didn't come back. She laughed. I should have known, of course. I hope you didn't take it personally. Certainly not, Bethra. It's just part of the profession, after all. I knew you'd understand, she said. I had to get rid of you. You were disrupting my entire plan. Silk grinned wickedly. I know, he gloated, and after all you had gone through to set it up, and with the Thullish ambassador, no less. She made a disgusted face. Whatever happened to him? Silk asked. He went swimming in the Nedrain. I didn't know that Thulls swam all that well. They don't, particularly not with large rocks tied to their feet. After you'd destroyed the whole thing, I didn't really need him anymore, and there were some things I didn't want him mentioning in certain quarters. You were always prudent, Bethra. What are you up to now? She asked curiously. Silk shrugged. A little of this, a little of that. The succession? Oh, no, he laughed. I know better than to get involved in that. Which side are you on? Wouldn't you like to know? Silk looked around, his eyes narrowing. I could use some information, Bethra, if you're free to talk about it, of course. About what, Silk? The city seems to be awash with Murgos, Silk said. If you're not presently involved with them, I'd appreciate anything you could tell me. She smiled at him archly. And what would you be willing to pay? She asked. Couldn't we just call it professional courtesy? She smiled wickedly at him. Then she laughed. Why not? I like you, Silk, and I think I'll like you even more if you owe me a favor. I'll be your slave, he promised. Liar. She thought for a moment. The Murgos have never really shown all that much interest in trade, she said, but a few years ago they began arriving in 2s and 3s, and then late last summer whole caravans started coming in from Rakgoska. You think they want to influence the succession? Silk asked. That would be my guess, she said. There's a great deal of red gold in Tolnedra suddenly. My coin chests are full of it. Silk grinned. It all spends. It does indeed. Have they picked any one candidate? Not that I've been able to determine. They seem to be divided into 2 different factions, and there's quite a bit of antagonism between them. That could be a ruse, of course. I don't think so. I think the antagonism has to do with the quarrel between Zedar and Ktuchik. Each side wants to get control of the next emperor. They're spending money like water. Do you know the one called Asherak? Ah, that one, she replied. The other Murgos are all afraid of him. At the moment, he seems to be working for Ktuchik, but I think he's playing some game of his own. He owns the Grand Duke Cador outright, and Cador's closest to the throne right now. That puts Asherak in a very powerful position. That's about all I really know. Thank you, Bethra, Silk said respectfully. Are you planning to stay in Tolnedra for long? She asked. Unfortunately, no. Pity. I was hoping you might be able to come by for a visit. We could talk over old times. I don't have many close friends anymore. Or dear enemies like you. Silk laughed dryly. I wonder why, he said. I don't imagine I could swim much better than the Thullish ambassador did. You're a dangerous woman, Bethra. In more ways than one, she admitted, stretching languidly. But your life's not really in any danger from me, Silk. Not any more. It wasn't my life I was worried about. Silk grinned. That's another matter, of course, she admitted. Don't forget that you owe me a favor. I hunger for the opportunity to repay my debt, he said impudently. You're impossible. She laughed, then gestured to her porters, and they lifted her litter to their shoulders. Goodbye, Silk, she said. Goodbye, Bethra, he replied with a deep bow. Absolutely disgusting, Dernick said, in a voice strangled with outrage, as the porters marched away with the litter. Why is a woman like that even permitted to stay in the city? I don't know what's happening to his voice. Bethra? Silk asked in surprise. She's the most brilliant and fascinating woman in Tolnedra. Men come from all over the world just for an hour or two with her. For a price, of course, Dernick said. Don't misunderstand her, Dernick, Silk told him. Her conversation's probably more valuable than... He coughed slightly with a quick glance at Aunt Pole. Really? Dernick questioned in a voice heavy with sarcasm. Minicake says, girl power. Silk laughed. Dernick, he said, I love you like a brother, but you're a terrible prude. Do you know that? Leave him alone, Silk, Aunt Pole said firmly. I like him exactly the way he is. Farmo says Dernick is a bit of a prude, and then, Silk agrees. I'm only trying to improve him, Lady Polgara, Silk explained innocently. Barak's right about you, Prince Keldar, she said. You're a very bad man. It's all in the line of duty. I sacrifice my more delicate feelings for the sake of my country. Of course. Surely you don't imagine that I enjoy that sort of thing? Why don't we just let it drop? She suggested. Grinnig, Barak, and Mr. Wolf returned to Grinnig's house not long after the others had arrived. Well, Aunt Pole asked as the old man came into the room where they had been waiting. He went south, Wolf said. South? He didn't turn east toward Tholmergos? No, Wolf said. He's probably trying to avoid a meeting with Ktuchik's people. He'll look for a quiet place to slip across the border. Either that, or he's headed for Nyissa. Perhaps he's made some arrangement with Salmisra. We'll have to follow him to find out. I met an old friend in the marketplace, Silk said from the chair in which he lounged. She tells me that Asherak's been involved in the politics of succession. It appears that he's managed... Bit of a typo here. My copy just says he's managed, no D on the end. It appears that he's managed to buy the Grand Duke of Vordu. If the Vorduvians get the throne, Asherak's going to have Tolnedra in the palm of his hand. Mr. Wolf scratched thoughtfully at his beard. We're going to have to do something about him, sooner or later. He's beginning to make me just a little tired. We could stop over for a day or so, Aunt Pole suggested. Attend to it once and for all. No, Wolf decided. It's probably best not to do that sort of thing here in the city. The business is likely to be a bit noisy, and Tolnedrans get excited about things they can't understand. I'm sure he'll give us an opportunity later, in some less populated place. Do we leave now, then? Silk asked. Let's wait until early morning, Wolf told him. We'll probably be followed, But if the streets are empty, it will make things a little more difficult for them. Let me try and remember Grineg's voice. I'll talk to my cook, then, Grineg said. The least I can do is send you on your way with a good meal to help you face the road. Then, of course, there's still that barrel of ale to be dealt with. Mr. Wolf smiled broadly at that, then caught Aunt Pole's reproving frown. It would only go flat, Pole, he explained. Once it's broached, you have to drink it up fairly quickly. It would be a shame to waste it, wouldn't it? Such a shame. All right, it's only 7:15, so Chapter 18 on page 195, well, the bottom of 195 in my copy. They left Grineg's house before dawn the next morning, dressed once more in their traveling clothes. They slipped quietly out a back gate and proceeded through those narrow alleys and back streets Silk always seemed able to find. Mr. must be a bit tired, Mr. Sharky Dirt. Mr. Sharky must be a bit tired. Almost read it. Mr. Wolf thought scratchfully. Scratched thoughtfully? Thought scratchfully? Well, fail paste. The sky to the east was beginning to lighten when they reached the massive bronze gate on the south end of the island. How long until the gate opens? Mr. Wolf asked one of the legionnaires. Farmo says everyone's spoonering today. Not much longer, the legionnaire told him. Just as soon as we can see the far bank clearly. Wolf grunted. He had grown quite mellow the evening before, and was obvious, that's quite the euphemism. He had grown quite mellow the evening before. Use that the next time you're blitzed. He had grown quite mellow the evening before, and was obviously troubled by a headache this morning. He dismounted, went to one of the pack horses, and drank from a leather water skin. That isn't going to help, you know, Aunt Pole told him a bit smugly. He chose not to answer. I think it's going to be a lovely day today, she said brightly, looking first at the sky and then at the men around her who slumped into their saddles in attitudes of miserable dejection. You're a cruel woman, Bolgara, Barak said sadly. Did you talk to Grineg about that ship? Mr. Wolf asked. I think so, Barak replied. I seem to remember saying something about it. It's fairly important, Wolf said. What's this? Aunt Pole asked. I thought it might not be a bad idea to have a ship waiting off the mouth of the River of the Woods, Wolf said. If we have to go to this tor, it would probably be better to sail there, rather than wade through the swamps in northern Nyissa. That's a very good idea, actually, she approved. I'm surprised it occurred to you, considering your condition last night. Do you suppose we could talk about something else? He asked somewhat plaintively. It grew imperceptibly lighter, and the command to open the gate came from the watchtower on the wall above. The legionnaires slipped the iron bar and swung the ponderous gate open. With Mandaralin at his side, Silk led them out through the thick portal and across the bridge that spanned the dark waters of the Nedrain. the Nedrain. By noon, they were 8 leagues south of Tolnedra, and Mr. Wolf had somewhat regained his composure, though his eyes still seemed a bit sensitive to the bright spring sunlight, and he winced now and then when a bird sang a bit too near. "Riders coming up behind," Hetar said.
"How many?"
Barak asked. 2. "Ordinary travelers, perhaps?" Aunt Pole said. The 2 figures on horseback appeared from around a bend behind them and stopped. They spoke together for a moment or two, and then came on, their bearing somewhat cautious. They were a peculiar pair. The man wore a green Tolnedran mantle, a garment not really suited for riding. His forehead was quite high, and his hair was carefully combed to conceal his encroaching baldness. Minicake's heading for bed? All right. Have a good night. Thanks for showing up again. It's good to see you. Hope you get a good night's sleep. I'll be back here same time on Friday. Every Wednesday and Friday. All right. Good night. His hair was carefully combed to conceal his encroaching baldness. He's got a comb over. Or maybe a comb down. Maybe his hair is coming down his forehead like this. He was very skinny, and his ears stuck out from the side of his head like flaps. We are not getting a flattering description of skinny bald man. His companion appeared to be a child, dressed in a hooded traveling cloak and with a kerchief across her face to keep out the dust. "Good day to you," the skinny man greeted them politely as the pair drew alongside. "Hello," Silk returned. "Warm for so early in the year, isn't it?" the Tolnedran said. "We noticed that," Silk agreed. "I wonder," the skinny man asked, "do you have a bit of water you could spare?" "Of course," Silk said. The Sharkies say, after such fancy words as propinquity, flaps sounds so slangy. Yeah, this isn't Mandaraldan describing the skinny man. Sometimes the right word for the job is flaps. Pharma says, "Get you a writer who will do both." "Of course," Silk said. He looked at Garion and gestured toward the pack animals. Garion dropped back and unhooked a leather waterskin from one of the packs. The stranger removed the wooden stopper and carefully wiped the mouth of the skin. He offered the bag to his companion. She removed her kerchief and looked at the skin with an expression of perplexity. "Like this, my lady," the man explained, taking the skin back, raising it in both hands, and drinking. "I see," the girl said. Garion looked at her more closely. The voice was familiar for some reason, and there was something about her face. She was not a child, though she was very small, and there was a kind of self-indulged petulance about her tiny face. Garion was almost certain he had seen her somewhere before. That's a mystery, isn't it? The Tolnedran handed the waterskin back to her, and she drank, making a small face at the resinous taste. Her hair was a purplish black, and there were faint, dark smears on the collar of her traveling cloak that indicated that the color was not natural. "Thank you, Jeepers," she said after she had drunk. "And thank you, sir," she said to Silk. Garion's eyes narrowed as a dreadful suspicion began to grow in his mind. Pharma says, "Jeebers, now where have we heard that name before?" And Sharkies are yelling, "It's Jeebers Creepers!" I don't know, we haven't heard anything about his peepers. Garion's eyes narrowed as a dreadful suspicion began to grow in his mind. Not even like the faintest attempt at subtlety here. Parmos may be squeaking. "Are you going far?" the skinny man asked Silk. "Quite a ways," Silk answered. "I'm Radek of Boktor, a Dresnian merchant, and I'm bound to the south with Sendarian woolens." Weren't those woolens headed for Tolhoneth? Oh, here's our answer. Immediately the next sentence. "This break in the weather destroyed the market in Tolhoneth, so I thought I'd try Tolrain. It's in the mountains, and it's probably still cold there." "You're taking the wrong road, then," the stranger said. "The road to Tolrain lies off to the east." "I've had trouble on that road," Silk said glibly. "Robbers, you know. I thought it'd be safer to go through Tol Boroon." "What a coincidence," the skinny man told him. "My pupil and I are bound for Tol Boroon ourselves." "Yes," Silk admitted. "Quite a coincidence." "Perhaps we could ride together." Silk looked doubtful. "I don't see any reason why not," Aunt Pole decided before he could refuse. "You're most kind, gracious lady," the stranger said. "I am Master Jeebers, Fellow of the Imperial Society, a tutor by profession. Perhaps you've heard of me?" "I can't really say so," Silk told him, "although that's not too remarkable, since we're strangers here in Tolnedra." Farmo says, "Oh, we have." Jeebers looked a bit disappointed. "I suppose that's true," he said. "This is my pupil, Lady Sharell. Her father's a grand master merchant, the Baron Reldon. I'm accompanying her to Tol Boroon, where she's to visit relatives." Garion knew that was not true. The tutor's name had confirmed his suspicions. They rode several miles further, with Jeebers babbling animatedly at Silk. He spoke endlessly about his learning and continually prefaced his remarks with references to important people who seemed to rely on his judgment. Although he was tiresome, he appeared to be quite harmless. His pupil rode beside Aunt Pole, saying very little. "I think it's time we stopped for a bite to eat," Aunt Pole announced. "Would you and your pupil care to join us, Master Jeebers? We have plenty." "I'm quite overcome by your generosity," the tutor said. "We'd be delighted." They stopped the horses near a small bridge that crossed a brook and led them into the shade of a thick clump of willows not far from the road. Dernick built a fire, and Aunt Pole began to unload her pots and kettles. Master Jeebers' pupil sat in her saddle until the tutor quickly stepped over to help her down. She looked at the slightly marshy ground near the brook, unenthusiastically. Then she glanced imperiously at Geryon. "You, boy," she called, "fetch me a cup of fresh water." "The brook's right there," he told her, pointing. She stared at him in amazement. "But the ground's all muddy," she objected. "It does seem that way, doesn't it?" he admitted, and then quite deliberately turned his back on her and went over to help his aunt. Sometimes I feel like Geryon is... You can tell what Geryon has gotten from Aunt Pole. Farmo says, "Oh, farm boy." More Princess Bride. Every now and then, Geryon gets this impulse to be, like, quietly mean to someone, and I feel like he sounds exactly like Aunt Pole. Like, when he punched that boy in the nose in Cherek, and then told him to put snow on it. That sounded like Aunt Pole coming up to me. Same thing here. "Oh yeah, it's muddy." Anyways. Farmo says, "Except less as you wish and more get it yourself." "Aunt Pole," he said after several moments of debating with himself. "Yes, dear?" "I don't think the Lady Sharell's who she says she is." Sharky says, "Except when he decided in his woke rage to attack Leldoran for singing." When he's quietly mean, not when he's angry, when he's quietly mean to someone. "I don't think the Lady Sharell's who she says she is." "Oh?" "I'm not completely positive, but I think she's the Princess Tolnedra, the one who came into the garden when we were at the palace." "Yes, dear, I know." "You know?" "Of course. Would you hand me the salt, please?" "Isn't it dangerous to have her with us?" "Not really," she said. "I think we can manage it." "Won't she be a lot of bother?" "An imperial princess is supposed to be a lot of bother, dear." Farmo saying, "Come on, Geryon, it's Aunt Pole. If you caught it." Sometimes Geryon notices things that other people don't, to be fair. Occasionally, he notices something before other people do. Maybe not something this obvious, though. But this was pretty obvious. Yeah, I do feel like the more obvious it is, the less likely he is to be the first to notice it. The converse is not necessarily true, but... After they had eaten a savory stew, which seemed to Geryon quite good, but which their little guest appeared to find distasteful. Also, I want to go back to that line, "An imperial princess is supposed to be a lot of bother." That's funny. Farmo says he only notices really obscure things. Sometimes someone else will, like sometimes Silk will, or maybe Mr. Wolf. Honestly, it's usually between Silk and Geryon. One of those two. Sharky say, the more that it's something not meant to be heard by others, then Geryon is going to be the one to hear it. Because otherwise we'd have to hear it from a third party, right? Like, we're only getting Geryon's point of view, so of course he has to be the one to eavesdrop all the time. After they had eaten a savory stew, which seemed to Geryon quite good, Jeebers began to approach a subject which had obviously been on his mind since they had first met. Despite the best efforts of the legions, the roads are never entirely safe, the fussy man said. It's imprudent to travel alone, and the Lady Sharell's been entrusted to my care. Since I'm responsible for her safety, I was wondering if we might travel along with you. We wouldn't be any bother, and I'd be more than happy to pay for whatever food we eat. Silk glanced quickly at Aunt Pole. Of course, she said. Silk looked surprised. There's no reason we can't travel together, she went on. We're all going to the same place, after all. Silk shrugged. Anything you say. Farmo says Garion notices things in a U shape. Like if it's really obscure, he won't notice it, or if it's really obvious. But if it's just the right amount of obscure, maybe. Garion knew the idea was a mistake, so serious that it bordered on disaster. Jeebers would not be a good traveling companion, and his pupil showed every sign of quickly becoming intolerable. She was obviously accustomed to extensive personal service, and her demands were probably made without thought. They were still demands, however, and Garion knew immediately who was most likely to be expected to attend to them. He got up and walked around to the far side of the clump of willows. The fields beyond the trees were pale green in the spring sunshine, and small white clouds drifted lazily across the sky. Garion leaned against a tree and gazed out at the fields without actually seeing them. He would not become a servant, no matter who their little guest might be. He wished there were some way he could get that firmly established right at the outset, before things got out of hand. Ready for some overhearing?
Have you lost your senses, Pole?
He heard Mr. Wolf say somewhere behind him among the trees.
Ranboroon's probably got every legion in Tolnedra looking for her by now.
This is my province, old wolf, Aunt Pole told him. Don't interfere. I can manage things so that we won't be bothered by the legions. Farmo says, I may have been learning about things with U/arc-shaped correlations lately. Ah.
We don't have the time to coddle her, the old man said. I'm sorry, Pole, but the child's going to be an absolute little monster. You saw the way she acted toward her father.
It's no great chore to break bad habits, she said, unconcerned.
Wouldn't it be simpler just to arrange to have her taken back to Tolnedra?
She's already run away once, Aunt Pole answered. If we send her back, she'll just run away again. I'll feel much more comfortable having her Imperial Little Highness where I can put my hands on her when I need her. When the proper time comes, I don't want to have to take the world apart looking for her. Wolf sighed. Farmer says, U-shaped correlations like caffeine and some memory things, also age and visual search tasks. Like, when you're young, you're bad at visual search tasks, and then you get better at it and better at it, and then you get worse and worse and worse. Wolf sighed.
Have it your way, Pole.
Naturally.
Just keep the brat away from me, he said. She sets my teeth on edge. Do any of the others know who she is?
Garion does.
Garion? That's surprising.
Not really, Aunt Pole said. He's brighter than he looks. That's interesting because that implies that Garion, Aunt Pole, and Mr. Wolf are the only ones who know who she is. Farmer says, and enough caffeine is good for some recall stuff, but too much makes it bad. Sharky say, ouch. And Farmo says, Aunt Pole just implies he looks dumb. A new emotion began to grow in Garion's already confused mind. Aunt Pole's obvious interest in Tolnedra sent a sharp pang through him. With a certain amount of shame, he realized that he was jealous of the attention the girl was receiving. In the days that followed, Garion's fears quickly proved to be well-founded. An inadvertent remark about Faldor's farm had revealed quite early to the princess his former status as a scullery boy, and she used the knowledge heartlessly to browbeat him into 100 stupid little errands every day. To make it all worse, each time he tried to resist, Aunt Pole would firmly remind him to pay more attention to his manners. Inevitably, he became quite surly about the whole business. The princess developed a story about the reason for her departure from Tolnedra as they rode south. The story changed daily, growing more wildly implausible with every passing league. At first, she seemed content to be on a simple excursion to visit relatives. Then she dropped dark hints about flight from a marriage to an ugly old merchant. Next, there were even darker hints about a plot to capture her and hold her for ransom. Finally, in a crowning effort, she confided to them that the proposed kidnapping was politically motivated, a part of some vast scheme to gain power in Tolnedra. She's an awful liar, isn't she? Garion asked Aunt Pole when they were alone one evening. Yes, dear, Aunt Pole agreed. Lying is an art. A good lie shouldn't be embellished so much. She'll need a lot more practice if she plans to make a career of it. Aunt Pole giving advice on lying. Sharky say, when she's first described, it says she has fiery hair. But just now, when she and Jeebers rode up, she has dark purple hair, and the dye had rubbed off, so she obviously recently dyed her hair as a disguise. I'm guessing if any of the others know, it's Silk. Yeah, see, that's the part that I'm kind of surprised on. The, Aunt Pole saying Garion noticed, but not mentioning Silk. Because I would expect Silk to notice immediately. But either Aunt Pole just didn't feel it necessary to mention that, or he hasn't noticed, or Aunt Pole doesn't know that he's noticed. One of those three options. Finally, about 10 days after they had left Tolnedra, the city of Tolborun came into sight in the afternoon sun. It looks like this is where we part company, Silk said to Jeebers with a certain amount of relief. Aren't you going into the city? Jeebers asked. I don't think so, Silk answered. We don't really have any business to take care of there. and the usual explanations and searches just waste time, not to mention the expense of the bribes. We'll go around Tol Boroon and pick up the road to Tol Rain on the other side. We can ride a bit farther with you then, Tolnedra said quickly. My relatives live on an estate to the south of the city. Jeebers stared at her in astonishment. Aunt Pole drew in her horse and looked at the small girl with a raised eyebrow. This seems like as good a place as any for us to have a little talk, she said. Farmo says she would guess that Silk has a suspicion, at least by now. And the Sharky say, aren't you coming with us? No, we're going another way. You know, I just remembered, I think I left my oven on. We better head back. This seems like as good a place as any for us to have a little talk, she said. Silk looked quickly at her and then nodded. I believe, little lady, Aunt Pole told the girl when they had all dismounted, that the time has come for you to tell us the truth. But I have, Tolnedra protested. Oh, come now, child, Aunt Pole said. Those stories of yours have been very entertaining, but you don't actually think anyone believed them, do you? Some of us already know who you are, but I really think we should get it out in the open. You know? Tolnedra faltered. Of course, dear, Aunt Pole said. Would you like to tell them, or shall I? Tolnedra's little shoulders drooped. Sharky say, the time has come, the auntie said, to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings. Tolnedra's little shoulders drooped. Tell them who I am, Master Jeebers, she ordered quietly. Farmos says, less about the cabbages, perhaps? Yeah, basically everything else. Sealing wax? Yeah. Wait, is it sealing C-E-I, or is it sealing S-E-A? Because I know what sealing wax is for, like, sealing a letter, but I don't know what sealing wax is for sealings. Maybe if you have, like, a shiny sealing that needs waxing. Oops. For waxing your sealing. Yeah. Gotta get up there and give it a good wax. Okay, alright. Because honestly, it could have been sealing wax, but that would have definitely not made as much sense to me. Tell them who I am, Master Jeebers, she ordered quietly. Do you really think that's wise, your ladyship? Jeebers asked nervously. They already know anyway, she said. If they were going to do anything to us, they'd have done it a long time ago. We can trust them. Jeebers drew in a deep breath and then spoke rather formally. I have the honor to introduce Her Imperial Highness, the Princess Tolnedra, daughter to His Imperial Majesty Ran Boroon the 23rd, and the jewel of the House of Boroon. Silk whistled, and his eyes widened momentarily. The others showed similar signs of amazement, so really only Mr. Wolf, Garion, and Aunt Pole figured out who she was. Silk didn't figure it out. That's weird. That seems out of character to me. Either that, or her disguise was better than Garion described it, and Garion is actually quite sharp. Maybe no one else paid any attention to her when she came in to yell at the Emperor. But the way that this is described, which is what I thought I remembered, the way this is described, Silk didn't know who she was. Pharma says, or maybe he's just looking surprised in order to be polite. I mean, I imagine that he knew that she was disguised, but maybe she just didn't know who she was, which seems strange. Sharky says, Tolnedra is really bad at this. Aunt Pole didn't actually call out who she is. She just said, we know your secret, you better tell it to everyone. Yeah. Tolnedra probably has never had to lie before. She's clearly never been out of the city, or at least not just on horseback. If she has, it's probably been by carriage or something. Yeah, she's probably been out of the city, but if she has, it's only been by carriage. She's concerned about mud, Aunt Pole's cooking isn't good enough. So she's never had, food that's meant for travel. So she's definitely very inexperienced in many things. She's an imperial princess, so. But yes, it could have been any secret. I guess Aunt Pole said, we know who you are, right? Yeah, she said some of us already know who you are, but she didn't say, again, they could have just recognized that she was in disguise, but not exactly who she is. Pharma says, or her lies are believed as a matter of course by her attendants, so she's never had to be good at it. I appreciate that her, storytelling about her background got so, got more and more extreme. It reminds me of, I've seen a lot of posts online recently about the movie Turning Red, and people are saying, a lot of people are talking about the cringy things they did when they were 13 years old, fan fiction writing and things like that. I think she was mentioned to be maybe 14 or something, 14 or 15, heading towards 16. I think she's in the 14 range. Pharma says this does sound a bit like that. The political situation in Tolhoneth had become far too volatile, too menacing, for Her Highness to remain safely in the capital, Jeebers went on. The Emperor commissioned me to convey his daughter secretly here to Tol Borun, where the members of the Borun family can protect her from the plots and machinations of the Vordews, the Honeths, and the Horbites. I'm proud to say that I've managed to execute my commission rather brilliantly. With your help, of course. I'll mention your assistance in my report. A footnote, perhaps, or maybe even an appendix. Pharma says she's just writing fan fiction about herself. Yeah. Pharma says, wow, a whole appendix? List of, it's a list of sources of protection. Barak pulled at his beard. Reference section, yeah. His eyes thoughtful.
An imperial princess travels across half of Tolnedra with only a schoolmaster for protection, he questioned, at a time when they're knifing and poisoning each other in the streets.
It does seem a trifle risky, doesn't it? Hetar agreed. Did thine emperor charge thee with this task in person? Mandoralin asked Jeebers. It wasn't necessary, Jeebers said stiffly. His Highness has a great deal of respect for my judgment and discretion. He knew that I'd be able to devise a safe disguise and a secure mode of travel. The princess assured me of his absolute confidence in me. It all had to be done in utmost secrecy, of course. That's why she came to my chambers in the middle of the night to advise me of his instructions, and why we left the palace without telling anyone what we were. His voice trailed off, and he stared at Tolnedra in horror. Pharma says, Tolhoneth style. Oh boy, perhaps she's just never had to lie to anyone cunning. I like how nobody had to really fully point it out to him. He just had to say it out loud. You know, it's one of those things where, well, it made sense in my head. You might as well tell him the truth, dear, Aunt Pole advised the little princess. I think he's guessed already. Tolnedra's chin lifted arrogantly. The orders came from me, Jeebers, she told him. My father had nothing to do with it. Jeebers went deathly pale, and he nearly collapsed.
What idiocy made you decide to run away from your father's palace?
Barak demanded of the tiny girl.
All Tolnedra's probably looking for you, and we're caught right in the middle. Gently, Wolf said to the hulking Cherrick. She may be a princess, but she's still a little girl. Don't frighten her.
Harmo says, accidentally kidnapped a princess. Yeah. Jeebers, he's right to be horrified. He could get executed for this. The question's to the point, though, Hetar observed. If we're caught with an imperial princess in our company, we'll all see the inside of a Tolnedran dungeon. He turned to Tolnedra. Do you have an answer, or were you just playing games? She drew herself up haughtily. I'm not accustomed to explaining my actions to servants.
We're going to have to clear up a few misconceptions before long, I see, Wolf said.
Just answer the question, dear, Aunt Pole told the girl. Never mind who asked it. My father had imprisoned me in the palace, Tolnedra said in a rather offhand way, as if that explained everything. It was intolerable, so I left. There's another matter, too, but that's a matter of politics. You wouldn't understand.
You'd probably be surprised at what we'd understand, Tolnedra, Mr. Wolf told her.
I'm accustomed to being addressed as my lady, she said tartly, or as your highness.
And I'm accustomed to being told the truth.
I thought you were in charge, Tolnedra said to Silk. Appearances are deceiving, Silk observed blandly. I'd answer the question. It's an old treaty, she said. I didn't sign it, so I don't see why I should be bound by it. I'm supposed to present myself in the throne room at Riva on my 16th birthday.
We know that,
Barak said impatiently.
What's the problem?
I'm not going, that's all, Tolnedra announced. Pharma says, hashtag first world problems, imprisoned in the palace. I'm not going, that's all, Tolnedra announced. I won't go to Riva, and no one can make me go. The queen in the wood of the Dryads is my kinswoman, and she'll give me sanctuary. The queen in the wood of the Dryads. Wood, in this case, is capitalized. So is Dryads, but Jeebers had partially recovered.
"What have you done?" he demanded, aghast. "I undertook this with the clear understanding that I'd be rewarded, even promoted. You've put my head on the block, you little idiot!"
Jeebers! She cried, shocked at his words. Grandma says it sounds like a swear. It sounds like she's really shocked. I don't think I really noticed that reading it to myself, but saying it out loud, it's extra silly. Sharky say, and there's the reason the author named him that. I wonder when that became like an exclamation. I wonder if it was prior to this book. It probably was. That Jeepers Creepers song is pretty old. But I feel like Jeebers is more of like a Scooby-Doo thing. Pharma says, oh yes, he's a joke character. Oh, that's Jinkies, Pharma says. Okay. You don't think they ever say Jeebers in Scooby-Doo? Alright. Let's get off the road a ways, Silk suggested. We've obviously got quite a bit to discuss, and we are likely to be interrupted here on the main highway.
Probably a good idea,
Wolf agreed.
Let's find some quiet place and set up for the night. We'll decide what we're going to do, and then we can start out fresh in the morning.
They remounted and rode across the rolling fields toward a line of trees that marked the course of a winding country lane about a mile away. Oh, about there, Dernick suggested, pointing at a broad oak which stood beside the lane, its branches beginning to leaf out in the late afternoon sunlight.
That should do,
Wolf said. It was pleasant in the dappled shade beneath the spreading limbs of the oak. The lane was lined with low stone walls, mossy and cool. A stile stepped up over one of the walls just there. A stile, S-T-I-L-E, is that like a bridge over a wall, or like steps over a wall maybe? A stile stepped up over one of the walls just there, and a path meandered across the field from it toward a nearby pond, sparkling in the sun. We can put the fire down behind one of the walls, Dernick said. It won't be seen from the main road that way. I'll get some wood, Garion volunteered, looking at the dead limbs littering the grass beneath the tree. They had by now established a sort of routine in the setting up of a night's encampment. By now, I feel like they set up a routine a while ago. The tents were erected, the horses watered and picketed, and the fire was started, all within the space of an hour. Then Dernick, who had noticed a few telltale circles on the surface of the pond, heated an iron pin in the fire, and carefully hammered it into a hook. What's that for? Garion asked him. I thought some fish might be good for supper, the smith said, wiping the hook on the skirt of his leather tunic. He laid it aside then, and lifted a second pin out of the fire with a pair of tongs. Would you like to try your luck too? Garion grinned at him. Oh, let's see, Sharky say like turnstile, and Pharma says, an arrangement of steps that allows people, but not animals, to climb over a fence or wall. It looks like a pair of ladders going up and down a fence, apparently. Okay. So, that makes sense. Like, otherwise it would defeat the purpose of a wall if it were just something that animals could easily climb over. So making it. But, yeah, it's more or less roughly what I thought. Garion grinned at him. Barak, who sat nearby combing the snarls out of his beard. Okay, so Barak just maintains his appearance. Then the braiding and whatnot that didn't take that long earlier makes a little more sense. Barak just, I guess I underestimated him. Barak, who sat nearby combing the snarls out of his beard, looked up rather wistfully.
I don't suppose you'd have time to make another hook, would you?
He asked. Dernick chuckled. It only takes a couple of minutes.
We'll need bait,
Barak said, getting up quickly.
Where's your spade?
Not long afterward, the three of them crossed the field to the pond, cut some saplings for poles, and settled down to serious fishing. The fish, it appeared, were ravenous and attacked the worm-baited hooks in schools. Within the space of an hour, nearly 24 respectable-sized trout lay in a gleaming row on the grassy bank of the pond. Sharky say,
We'll need bait,
throws the princess in the pond. I think that might scare the fish. Farmo says, I have been at fishing exactly one time. Yeah, I think that's probably roughly the same for me. Aunt Pole inspected their catch gravely when they returned as the sky turned rosy overhead with the setting of the sun. Very nice, she told them. But you forgot to clean them.
Oh,
Barak said. He looked slightly pained.
We thought that, well, what I mean is, as long as we caught them.
He left it hanging. Go on, she said with a level gaze. Barak sighed.
I guess we'd better clean them,
he regretfully told Dernick and Garion. You're probably right, Dernick agreed. Mrs. Sharky has been commercially fishing salmon. Farmo says, really? That was probably pretty interesting. I would not have guessed you as a commercial fisher. The sky had turned purple with evening, and the stars had begun to come out when they sat down to eat. Aunt Pole had fried the trout to a crisp golden brown, and even the sulky little princess found nothing to complain about as she ate. Freshly caught, freshly grilled fish does sound pretty nice. Mrs. Sharky says, when I was a teen, went with my grandparents. Was that fun or awful? I feel like it's going to be one of those two things. Either fun or just terrible. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's somewhere in between. Farmo says, Steveston has a Fisherman's Wharf style deal and you could buy freshly caught fish on the weekends off the boats. Yeah, it was interesting. They had like rules posted. One of them was you're only allowed to sell fish off of a boat that has been caught by that boat, as a way to like stop people, I guess, from basically just setting up a store as a boat. Chicky says, I loved it, but also had a bit of feeling queasy after a few days. Oh, all right, so you were out for a longer trip, huh? Yeah, I'm pretty sure the Steveston fish market still happens there. So if you ever want fresh fish or, like, I think prawns, there's a variety of things there. That's a good place to go. We buy it straight from the boat. You were out for 11 days. Wow. It's quite the trip. Farmo says that's a long time to be out at sea. I mean, I've heard of longer trips, but yeah, for someone who that's not something you're accustomed to. Starting to feel hungry after all this food describing. Farmo says also cooking fish at home is fragrant. After they had finished, they set aside their plates and took up the problem of Tolnedra and her flight from Tolnedra. Jeebers had sunk into such abject melancholy that he could offer little to the discussion, and Tolnedra adamantly announced that even if they were to turn her over to the Baroons in the city, she would run away again. In the end, they reached no conclusion. "We're in trouble no matter what we do," Silk summed it all up ruefully. Sharky says, "How do you solve a problem like Tolnedra?" "Even if we try to deliver her to her family, there are bound to be some embarrassing questions, and I'm sure she can be counted on to invent a colorful story that will put us in the worst possible light." We can talk about it some more in the morning," Aunt Pole said. Her placid tone indicated that she had already made up her mind about something, but she did not elaborate. Shortly before midnight, Jeebers made his escape. They were all awakened by the thudding of his horse's hooves as the panic-stricken tutor fled at a gallop toward the walls of Tol Baroon. Now I want to go for fish and chips for lunch or something. Go to, what's the name of the place? There's a good place in Steveston that I like, which is called Dave's Fish and Chips. A lot of people like Pajo's, but I prefer Dave's. But there's a place over at Columbia Square, some pub that's got quite good fish and chips. Cockney Kings, as Vermo says. The one in New West. Yeah, it's got a nice lemony batter. Like the batter itself on the fish and chips is got like lemon in it, and their tartar sauce is pretty good too. Farmer says, and good non-battered stuff. Yeah, we'll have to make a trip over there sometime soon, and good chips. Now you'll have to try it. Yeah, it's at, I think it's called Columbia Square. There's like a Save-On and a Burger King. But yeah, I definitely recommend it. Oh, we'll all go as a group. Yeah, we should all go for lunch together or something. All right, so Jeebers made his escape. They were all awakened by the thudding of his horse's hooves as the panic-stricken tutor fled at a gallop toward the walls of Tol Baroon. Silk stood in the flickering light of the dying fire, his face angry. "Why didn't you stop him?" he asked Hetar, who had been standing watch. "I was told not to," the leather-clad Algar said with a glance at Aunt Pole. "It solves the only real problem we had," Aunt Pole explained. "The schoolmaster would only have been excess baggage." "You knew he was going to run away?" Silk asked. "Naturally. I helped him to arrive at the decision. He'll go straight to the Baroons and try to save his own skin by informing them that the princess ran away from the palace on her own, and that we have her now." "You have to stop him, then," Tolnedra said in a ringing voice. "Go after him! Bring him back!" "After all the trouble I went to persuading him to leave?" Aunt Pole asked. "Don't be foolish." "How dare you speak to me like that?" Tolnedra demanded. "You seem to forget who I am." "Young lady," Silk said urbanely, "I think you'd be amazed at how little Polgara's concerned about who you are." "Polgara?" Tolnedra faltered. "The Polgara? I thought you said that she was your sister." "I lied," Silk confessed. "It's a vice I have." Farmos says there are 2 locations of Cockney Kings. Also, oh, Am I blocking the view? I suppose I'll give Farmos a moment. Let's see how much is left. Oh, we're almost on this chapter. There is like a page left, which is good because we've just had JTL Chicken World delivered. It's a Korean fried chicken place that does rice flour, so it's got gluten-free options. It's very good. I very much enjoy their hot soy garlic chicken, which is not gluten-free, but it's so tasty. It's very good fresh. It's weird. It's very tasty fresh, but as leftovers, it gets much spicier. I don't know if that's because of like water escaping and like concentrating the spice level. Sharky. Oh, Lilyfae, hello! Showed up just in time for me talking about Chicken World. And Sharky say, we plan to try Korean fried chicken next week with waffles for Waffle Day. Ooh. I'm guessing the waffles part means that you have a place picked out, but if you don't, I highly recommend JTL Chicken World. It is probably my current favorite chicken place. Lilyfae says, I've never had chicken and waffles. Yeah, I don't think I have either. That's always seemed like a strange combo to me. Probably because I've never had it, but like, why chicken and waffles? Like, I don't understand why those go together. Farmos has had both separately. Yes, I have had both separately. Is it supposed to be a breakfast food, or is it supposed to be waffles as like a lunch or dinner? Sharkies will be making the waffles. Norwegian waffles, in fact, with Korean chicken for a Swedish holiday. Well, once again, allow me to recommend JTL Chicken World. It's very good, and they've got some very tasty options. They've got a lot of different options, but like the original by itself is very good, but there are lots of other tasty options. And they've got like one option where you can get 2 flavors as a combo. So I usually get the hot soy garlic and then something else. Today I'm trying maple honey. I'm going to finish this chapter. Lily, you came right before we were finished for the evening. We've got like a page left. We have officially had Tolnedra accompanying our group. Oh, you've been quietly lurking. Okay, all right, so you've been here for a bit. Maple honey sounds delicious. I don't think I've tried the maple honey before, so I am hoping so. I usually like a spicy one, but since I've got the hot soy garlic, it's nice to have something to balance that, I thought. Because last time I think I had the hot soy garlic and just the original, but that meant when I had it as leftover, it was like, this is getting too hot, and I didn't have anything really to balance that. So that was my my thought process this time. Sharky say the specific recipe makes the waffles Norwegian, plus your waffle makers, plural, are the heart-shaped ones. Sounds like a good meal, that's for sure. All right, where were we? The Polgara? I thought you said that she was your sister. I lied, Silk confessed. It's a vice I have. You're not an ordinary merchant, the girl accused him. He's Prince Keldar of Drasnia, Aunt Pole said. The others have a similar eminence. I'm sure you can see how little your title impresses us. We have our own titles, so we know how empty they are. I like that last bit. We know how empty they are. If you're Polgara, then he must be... The princess turned to stare at Mr. Wolf, who had seated himself on the lowest step of the stile to pull on his shoes. Yes, Aunt Pole said. He doesn't really look the part, does he? Well, the princess isn't necessarily slow. Farmo says, Mr. Wolf.
Surprise!
What are you doing in Tolnedra? Tolnedra asked in a stunned voice. Are you going to use magic of some kind to control the outcome of the succession?
Why should we?
Mr. Wolf said, getting to his feet.
Tolnedrans always seem to think that their politics shake the whole world. But the rest of the world's really not all that concerned about who gains the throne in Tolhoneth. We're here on a matter of much greater urgency.
He looked off into the darkness in the direction of Tol Baroon.
It will take Jeebers a certain amount of time to convince the people in the city that he's not a lunatic, he said. But it would probably be a good idea if we left the area. I imagine we'd better stay away from the main highway.
That's no problem, Silk assured him. What about me? Tolnedra asked. You wanted to go to the Wood of the Dryads, Aunt Pole told her. We're going in that direction anyway, so you'll stay with us. We'll see what Queen Xantha says when we get you there. Am I to consider myself a prisoner, then? The princess asked stiffly. You can if it makes you feel better, dear, Aunt Pole said. She looked at the tiny girl critically in the flickering firelight. I'm going to have to do something about your hair, though. What did you use for dye? It looks awful. Sharky say maybe Tolnedra is Toronto. They're obsessed with their news and can't imagine anything else is happening anywhere else. Random burn on Toronto out of left field. I don't think there's quite so many poisonings in Toronto. Maybe I'm wrong. I haven't actually gone there myself. Maybe people are dying in the street all the time. Ah, boy. Aunt Pole being sassy at the end there. Am I a prisoner? You can feel that way if it makes you feel better. We gotta fix your hair, though. Sharky say that I know of, yeah. Like I said, maybe they're getting poisoned in the street all the time. Maybe. Oh, boy. Well, that was fun. Jeebers and Tolnedra's ridiculous cover story. Garion's not happy about the whole thing, being treated as a servant. Oh boy, oh boy. Farmo says, hair not fit for a prisoner. The moment of realization for Jeebers. Of course the orders came from the Emperor, but of course the Emperor didn't tell me himself. It's a matter of great secrecy. That's why the princess came herself to my chambers in the middle of the night, and then we departed without... You little idiot! I thought I was gonna get a promotion. Oh boy. Oh Jeebers. Farmo says, no more my ladies. They all have similar titles, so we all know how empty they are. Well, I'm really hungry, and there is fresh Korean fried chicken waiting for me in the other room. It really is the best when it's fresh. So, Sharky say, Jeebers just reminded me of Squidward. I hesitate to say this on the internet. I have never watched an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants. Ever. I've never watched a full episode. I've seen clips, of course. It's unavoidable. But I've never actually watched beginning to end an episode. There you have it. I'm sorry. Please don't cancel me. It's not that I dislike it, honestly, and what I've seen of it actually does seem very funny. I've just never done it. Never watched it. All right. No one on my list is streaming. Does Lily have someone that she suggests I raid out to? Because I want to go eat. If not, I'll just wrap things up here. Be back on Friday. Same sleep time, same sleep channel. And we'll find out how traveling further with Tolnedra goes. Shirky says, not surprising really. Mister has never really watched SpongeBob a lot either, till kids. Yeah, I think it was like kind of just just out of my age range when it started. Or like I was just old enough to think I was too cool for something called SpongeBob SquarePants, so I didn't give it a chance at that time. Something like that. Well, I'm hungry. So, have a good night, everyone. Have a good rest of your week. And I'll be back on Friday, of course. And then next week, we may have a guest appearance. So, I'm not going to say who, but look forward to that. It's someone that everyone is going to appreciate. I promise. All right. So look forward to that. And I'll see you on Friday. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.